going to get started in just a minute. We're just going to give everyone a chance to join us live, and then we'll get going. Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. We should have a few people joining us from schools and groups today, so if you're open to doing it, you can type through in the chat box and tell us where you're joining us from and how many of you are watching from the computer today. We're just going to run through a few slides, introductory slides, and then we'll head over to the presentation from our two experts. We're joined today by Dr. Danica Marlin, who's the head of research at SST, as well as Samuel Pillay, who coordinates the Ghost Gear project. Just one or two things before we get started. You have been muted as part of the standard Zoom webinar feature, but we really want to hear from you and hear if you have any questions and things today. So if you could type your questions in the chat box or in the Q&A box, we'd love to hear those, and we'll read those out at the end of the presentation. But you can send them through as we go so that you don't forget. Then during the Q&A session, you're welcome to pose any topics for discussion with the presenters or the other attendees. Then if you have any questions after today's session and you want to get in touch with us, you or your parents or your teacher can email us at webinars@sstafrica.org.za. And these will be available on YouTube after today's session. So now I'm going to hand over to our speakers today, and we're very excited to hear from them. So we're going to be hearing from Dr. Danica Marlin and Samuel Pillay about Ghost Gear.
Hi everyone, my name is Sam Pillay. I am from the Sustainable Seas Trust, and this is?
I'm Dr. Danica, and I'm also from Sustainable Seas Trust.
And today we're going to be telling you about ghosts in the sea.
Okay, but before we tell you about the ghosts, we need to tell you about fishing. And fishing is important because without it, many people wouldn't have food or money or jobs. Now, fish and other marine organisms are important because almost just under half of the world eats fish and seafood as part of their everyday diet. Also, the business of fishing creates jobs. The most obvious ones are fishermen, but also there needs to be people who clean the fish and who sell the fish. Then there's other jobs like managing the fisheries and doing research and education about fish, like what we're doing right now. Of all the jobs that this fishing sector creates, there are 12 million people in Africa involved in fishing. Now, with having jobs, it also means that people have money, and that means the country's economy grows and everybody gets wealthier and is better off. But to make sure that there's always food, jobs, and money that comes from fishing, it is important that fishing is sustainable. So what is sustainable? It means that we do not catch so many fish that eventually there are no more fish to catch. Fishermen must only catch a certain amount of fish that are a certain size. This way, both humans and sea creatures will survive and be healthy. When the way we fish is sustainable, we protect our environment, but when it is unsustainable, it is harmful and even deadly to the environment. So what is ghost fishing?
I'm going to tell you guys about ghost fishing. Ghost fishing is not a supernatural phenomenon. It happens when fishing gear such as nets, ropes, traps, lobster pots, hooks, and long lines are lost out at sea, and it carries on doing what it's supposed to do, which is to catch fish. Gear can be lost because of bad weather, or nets can get entangled in ships or hooked onto rocks or the ocean floor. Sometimes gear is purposely thrown overboard, maybe because it is old and cannot be used anymore, or because there are no bins provided for fishing gear in harbors. But throwing gear overboard on purpose is not allowed, and it is illegal. Fishing gear that is left at sea can haunt many types of animals that are unlucky to get caught in it. So if we look at the diagram shown onto the screen right now, when an animal gets caught in a fishing net, it will struggle to eat and move, and it will eventually sink to the bottom of the ocean floor, and it will die. But it does not stop there, because the net can be brought back into the water by currents and carry on fishing animals, and this can carry on for even months or years. Animals that researchers have found caught in ghost gear include fish, sharks, turtles, seabirds, lobsters, crabs, even dolphins and whales.
Okay, so here we are going to give you examples, what we call entanglement. So many animals, like you see here, a seal will get entangled in nets. Here is another turtle. Now it's got its feet entangled in the netted slippers, which means it's really struggling to swim. It's eventually going to get too weak to swim, and unless we save it, it may die. Okay, the other problem with ghost fishing is not just that fish get caught in it, but the nets will land up at the bottom of the ocean, like you see in these pictures. And what happens is that the organisms and the corals that are caught there cannot survive because they're now tangled up in this gear. Okay, so other problems that are associated with ghost fishing is that technically all fishing gear is made of, well, most fishing gear is made of plastic. Okay, so it becomes a type of plastic pollution that we will see floating out at sea. But also, when plastic breaks down, it creates tiny little particles called microplastics, which are a problem not just for the fish, but also for us. But also, plastics, when they break down, release very harmful chemicals into the water. When microplastics, as the plastics get smaller, they eventually get eaten by other marine organisms like mussels. The mussels can then get eaten by fish, and eventually we end up eating fish that may have plastics in it. So it is actually really important for human health that we do not have fishing gear floating around out at sea.
So I'm going to tell you about some of the global organizations and what they are doing to address the ghost gear problem. First up, we have the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, and they're working in terms of research, education, and smaller programs to help and benefit the public and people with regards to ghost fishing. The next up, we have the Global Ghost Gear Initiative. This works with different businesses, and they use information workshops to tell people about ghost fishing. And their volunteers collect gear from beaches and even dive to collect ghost gear from the ocean. Next up is the Ocean Defenders Alliance. They remove thrown away fishing nets, traps, and other litter from the ocean. And lastly is the World Animal Protection. But Danny's going to tell us a bit more about fishing gear examples.
Okay, so here are just two pictures showing you what humans can do to help remove fishing gear from the ocean. So sometimes there are divers who go to the bottom of the ocean and they take it from the ocean floor. And you can see there's a lot of it, so there's probably going to need to be more than just one diver there. But also we, as you can see, we go for a walk at the beach and you find something on the beach like that person in the photo, can be picked up and thrown away so that it doesn't kill any more animals. Okay, so now we're going to show you a video from the World Animal Protection to tell us what they do to help.
Marine wildlife is an essential part of the marine ecosystem. It keeps our oceans functioning the way they were meant to function. Approximately 136,000 whales, dolphins, seals, sea lions, and porpoises get entangled every single year, and those injuries can be catastrophic. The Sea Change campaign is focused on marine debris, specifically ghost fishing gear, and the recovery of that gear in order to prevent marine mammal entanglement. Part of our mission is to try to rescue as many entangled animals as possible. Marine Mammals of Maine is perfectly positioned to rescue marine wildlife.
We have that 2,500 miles of coastline. We respond to about 300 animals a year. So as we were starting to make plans for how we're going to make this triage center happen, we were really limited on funding. World Animal Protection had mentioned that they really wanted to help a group that was on the front lines of helping animals. Without World Animal Protection, we wouldn't be helping the animals that are in here today.
This is the first triage center for marine wildlife on the east coast of the United States.
We're the only gig in town. We're the only ones that are federally authorized to respond and help these animals. And without us, these animals would not be making it.
The fishing industry can be a tremendous part of helping to address this problem.
They're the eyes out there. They're the ones that are seeing what's going on.
What happens in the middle of the ocean is very difficult to catalog and to report. We are trying to track this information to identify where fishing gear is likely to get lost and where it's likely to end up. It's incredibly important for the overall health of our oceans, which impacts every human being on the planet. We use our oceans and we need to keep them healthy, and we need to protect the wildlife that lives there.
So we'll tell you a little bit about what we do at Sustainable Seas Trust. So Sam and I are researchers, and one of our biggest projects is called the Sea-Based Sources of Waste Project. And in this project, we look into ghost gear and the problem that goes with it all across South Africa. We're working with fishermen, governments, public, schools even, basically to get as much information as we can about ghost gear, so that we can then develop something called best practice guides. And these are books that will tell fishermen and governments and even us what we can do to be sustainable, to make sure the environment stays healthy. Basically, we want to make sure that fishing gear doesn't become ghost fishing gear.
So what can you do to help Danny and I in our fight to protect South Africa's marine environments? Well, when you're walking along beaches, and if you happen to see any fishing gear, definitely collect it and throw it into the bin. But before you do, definitely send us a picture as well. Help us keep our oceans clean. So aside from just walking along the beaches, it is also important that you help us educate your family and friends. So let everyone know about what you've learned today in terms of ghost gear and help us keep our oceans clean.
Okay, kids, so before we finish off, we just want to really end off by saying next time we go to the beach, take your nets, catch something or someone, see what you find out there. But remember, take it home, don't leave it on the beach.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to Dr. Danny Marlin and to Sam for sharing that with us today. If anyone does have any questions, you're welcome to send those through in the chat box or the Q&A box. We also, for Marine Week, have a few other options where you will be able to access some of our online activities on our Moodle platform. So you can go to africanwasteacademy.org and then you'll need to sign up. You can always use a teacher or a parent's help for that, just to use their email address. And then you'll go to the course called Marine Week 2021. And then if it asks you for a key, you can type in capital M, capital W 21. And there will be some new fun activities each day after the webinars until Friday. So now we're going to move on to the Q&A section, and Sam and Danny will hopefully have some wonderful answers for us today. We have had a few comments coming through saying that they're joining us from Sedgefield and a few other locations. I see we have a question here that says, why do people use ghost gear instead of things that are easier to clean up?
Okay, I will take this one. Hello, everyone. It's Danny here. So we don't technically want necessarily fishing gear to become ghost gear. So fishermen don't use ghost gear. They just use fishing gear, which becomes ghost gear. So fishing gear in itself isn't harmful if the fisherman takes it out of the sea or they don't leave it lying around on the beach. It only becomes ghost gear if it's left behind. There isn't really anything that's possibly easier to clean up. The fishing gear that exists nowadays is made specifically for the type of fish you wish to catch. It's not a problem until it gets left in the sea, and that's when we call it ghost gear.
Thank you so much, Danny. I see we have a few other questions that have come through here that says, do plastic nets and old fishing gear rot or break down or degrade?
So I'll take that one. Yes, because they are plastic in nature, they do biodegrade over time, but it's a really long time, sometimes even 300 years. And in that time, it can catch a lot of other fish and marine animals. And yeah, it can, of course, lead to harmful results for them. So it's important that we try our best to not lose fishing gear, fishing nets in particular, into the ocean. Yeah, thank you.
Can either of you tell us a little bit about the initiatives around the world where they collect ghost gear from the ocean?
Yeah, Tara, there's actually quite a few of them. The most sort of important one that's very well known is called the Global Ghost Gear Initiative, so triple GI. Basically, they are also an organization like Sustainable Seas Trust. They're a non-profit, and they work with fishermen, and they ask the fishermen that if you're out at sea and you see a ghost gear lying around, please bring it back to shore. But they also themselves will go onto beaches. They take their own boats and they go out to sea. So the staff themselves will collect the gear, but they also have fishermen that are helping them to collect the gear. So that's probably one of the best known sort of ghost gear initiatives globally.
Thanks, Danny. I see we have a question here in the Q&A box that says, I have a suggestion. Maybe you can send a cleanup crew every week to help clean up all the dirt. Does anyone want to comment on that? Sam or Dan?
Sure, this is a tough one. Yeah. Yeah, we would love to have a clean to do it permanently because there's not really enough money to pay someone to do that, and nobody really does work for free. However, this is where we can come in, and if we see something on the beach that shouldn't be there, we can take it and throw it away. Or, we can phone authorities, or perhaps your harbor, to ask that they come and help you take it away. But yeah, it would be a fantastic idea to have someone doing this regularly. Unfortunately, there's just not enough funding for it.
Thanks, Danny. There's another question here that says, how would we be able to prevent ghost fishing other than collecting it from the beach or in the sea?
I'll take that one. It would be more important to let authorities know if fishing gear is ever lost at sea. Most importantly, we want to try and ensure that gear is not lost at sea. So accountability in terms of when gear could be lost, if it gets attached to another vessel or ship, if it gets attached to the sea floor, letting relevant authorities know that this has happened and where it has happened ensures that fishing gear waste is not lost into the ocean. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. That's a very good point, that preventing the litter is much better than cleaning it up once it's already in the environment. There's another question or suggestion here that says, so can't they have a bin by the bay to throw away the ghost gear? And shouldn't they have a diver just in case the gear gets stuck or goes overboard? In a way, this is linked to the sustainable goals. Does anyone have any suggestions about that? Or aware of any bin projects that are specifically linked to ghost gear or fishing line?
I'm sorry, Sarah, I didn't catch the last part of what you said.
Sorry, I think the internet is sometimes a bit tricky. So someone suggested having specific bins for ghost gear. Does anyone want to comment on bins specifically for fishing line or any particular ghost gear?
So yes, to answer the question, absolutely. Having a bin at harbors and ports when ships come in to actually throw away old fishing gear or fishing gear that they no longer want to use is definitely the way to go. And it is something that is implemented throughout South Africa. Also, the Sustainable Seas Trust has partnered with Plastics SA, and we are erecting fishing line bins here in Port Elizabeth. And this is to help create awareness around the harmful effects of fishing line, and for fishermen to throw this line in these fishing line bins. And if we all work together, we can, of course, preserve and conserve our environment. Yeah. Sorry, I just see there's a part about a diver. And I think that it's so important to know that these are all really great ideas, and it is definitely something that I think should be enforced more, is to have people on ships that can actually, retrieve fishing gear if it gets stuck. Definitely.
Thank you, Sam. There's another question here from Sumia that says, if we see an animal stuck in ghost gear, should we help it even if it's dangerous? I think that might depend on the animal. If it's a shark, maybe. But Sam, Danny, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I'll comment on this one. So I think it's always safer to call someone who knows, firstly, how to remove the gear, whether it is an animal that's dangerous or not. But often you don't know who to call. So if it's possible for you to remove the gear and make sure the animal is then healthy enough to be released, then do so. If it isn't, then I would call maybe a local fishing club. They would need to phone maybe a museum. In Port Elizabeth, you would probably phone our Bay World Museum. Or, I mean, I guess you could even phone an organization that deals with this type of thing. So maybe even Sustainable Sea Stress if you're in Port Elizabeth. But depending on where you are, your best bet would be to connect with some fishing club. And if you're in a big city that has a museum, then I would kind of contact a museum.
Thanks, Danny. I know in PE we have Bay World and we have Sandcarp, and there are a few different organizations that look after particular animals. So if you find a turtle, for example, you could call Bay World in Port Elizabeth. But we'll be hearing more about that tomorrow and on Thursday, and about fish nurseries on Friday. Then there's a question that says, if you don't live by the sea, how can you help? That's a very good question. I think I would say, Sam, Danny, I'm not sure if you want to add to this, but I would think that just telling your family and friends about ghost gear and what it is and why we don't want it to happen and how we can prevent it might be helpful. I'm not sure if Sam or Danny.
I totally agree with that. Yeah, thanks, Tara. Yes, no, exactly. So tell as many people as you can. So if you're living far away from the sea, there'll be someone you know that goes to the beach every now and then, maybe for holiday. So the best thing you could do if you're inland is to make other people aware of what could be to prevent ghost gear.
Thank you, Danny. It did seem to break up a little bit there, but we've had some other questions come through that says, why do we make nets from plastic? Sam, I don't know if you want to try this one. Danny's internet seemed a little bit glitchy.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Plastic is a very durable material. And with anything that we make, it's all about meeting the requirements of the purpose of the material we're making. So fishing nets and other types of fishing gear made from plastics ensures durability. And fishing nets last up to about 3 years before they actually need to be replaced. So it can be used for quite a long time before it needs to be replaced. So that's the reason for plastic. Yeah.
Okay. And does this make the fishing nets quite heavy or very long?
I think fishing nets, for its practice, has to be a certain length. The average weight of a fishing net is around 5 to 7 kilograms for like really smaller fishing nets, and then it can go up to 45 kilograms for larger fishing nets. And the length of the fishing net depends again on the type of fish that's being catched. So yeah, it differs quite greatly. I just can't think of an estimate at the top of my head, but it depends on the amount of fish that needs to be catched by the fisherman. Yeah.
Wow, Sam, that sounds very big. And I think in one of the photos that you showed on the presentation, it looked like a person The net was almost as big as the person themselves. Can
If
you
not
tell
bigger,
us,
Tara, not bigger.
especially depending on who the person is. 45 kilograms is, yeah, definitely the weight of some people. Can you tell us, can old fishing nets be recycled?
Tara, well, no, not currently. In fact, not all plastics can be recycled. In South Africa, we are collecting certain fishing nets to be taken to sort of factories where they can get broken down. But if you're going to recycle fishing nets like any other plastic, it has to be clean. So one of the biggest challenges is that even though a fisherman may want to recycle his nets, it would have to be cleaned first. But just to answer your question in general, no, not every fishing gear can be recycled.
Thank you, Dani. That leads us nicely into another question that someone has said, that typed through here, that says, if ghost gear is covered in fungi and all that, should we still pick it up? I'll let Sam or Dani comment, but I would imagine that nothing there should necessarily make you sick.
Yeah.
Right,
No,
Dani?
you can definitely pick it up. There's nothing, yeah, as you say, there's nothing that you can touch on there that, well, maybe there's a little crab caught in it. But fungi and barnacles that could be attached to it, that will definitely not harm you. And so you can pick it up and throw it in a bin.
Thanks, Dani. Then there's some other questions that have come through that said, how are pots used in fishing? I think that's referring to some of the pictures that were shown in the slideshow.
Yes, so essentially crab pots are basically placed on the bottom of the seafloor, and interestingly enough, the crab would actually crawl into the pot and then it would get trapped. And yeah, essentially there's a float that's attached to the pot. So there's a rope and then a float where the fisherman can see if there's movement in the pot. And yeah, he would know that he's got a catch and he can actually collect his catch now. Yeah.
Okay, and then can turtles get caught in ghost gear as well?
Yes, most definitely. Turtles would most likely be caught in a line or sort of a piece of a fishing rope. The problem obviously with that is if it gets sort of entangled in its flippers, then the turtle can't swim. So often what happens is they get very, very tired and eventually they cannot get their own food. So generally, unless a turtle is removed from that, from the gear, if you can, if there's a person who can help a turtle, it often means the turtle will live with very limited movement. So they'll struggle to swim. And it could even mean that they'll eventually die.
Thanks, Dani. Then there was another question that says, is fishing line the same as ghost gear? So even those small little colorful lines of guts, is that the same? Can that cause the same damage?
Absolutely. Any form of fishing gear that is lost into the ocean is considered ghost gear once it enters into the ocean.
Thanks, Sam. I see one last question here, and then I think we'll end it for today. And we had planned to end at 2:45, so we'll be just on time. The last question is, if the fish and other animals were deep in the ocean, could they still end up on shore?
Yeah, so yes and no. If they're far off in the ocean and they're entangled, it depends what the currents are doing. So how's the water moving? Could it maybe move it all the way to the land? So it is possible that they will land up on shore. But yes, it very much depends on how far away from land they are and how the water or the sea is moving to get them there.
I just wanted to add to what Dani has said. When an animal gets entangled in fishing gear, it struggles to swim and it struggles to move in most cases. So it's more likely that they could actually end up on the shore, as she mentioned, because of currents and things like that, and the difficulty in navigating their way to where they need to be in the ocean. Yeah.
Okay, and then because you were both so quick, one very last question that says, why is it considered ghost gear? I'm not sure if that was talking specifically about the fishing line, But I don't know if you just want to close off there with that
Yeah.
answer.
Sure. If you lose a piece of fishing line, for example, it generally gets lost it wraps up into like a bundle, and it gets attached to the animal when it comes in contact with them. Especially if the animal swims right into the fishing line or thinks it's maybe like food because it's very colorful. So anything, of course, that can get entangled or wrapped around an animal, we of course would consider that as a form of entanglement. So even something as small and colorful as fishing line. So make sure to tell all your family and friends that go fishing not to throw the fishing line into the ocean.
Okay, thanks so much, Sam and Danny. It was quite a short webinar today, but we'll be back again tomorrow and Thursday and Friday with a few other topics. So we hope to see you all there. It's 2:45 now, so we're going to close off today's session. But we hope to see you all there tomorrow, and you can go look at our africanwasteacademy.org Moodle platform, and there you can find some fun activities there based on today's presentation. I just want to say thank you so much to Dr. Danny and to Samuel for taking the time to talk to us today and to tell us all about ghost gear and share their love of the sea with us. Thanks so much, everyone, and we hope to see you tomorrow. Again, if you have any questions for Sam or Danny at a later stage, you can send those to us via email at webinars@sstafrica.org. Thanks so much, everyone, and we'll see you tomorrow.